And joining us on the phone right now is Jerry Watson, Chief Legal Officer of AIA, the oldest and largest family of bail bond insurance companies in America or in the world, Jerry?
In the world.
In the world. That's quite how far back do you date?
Well, I've been an attorney for the company for 43 years, starting last month, and the company is this year 107 years old.
Holy cow. So this goes back a long time, and in fact, the reason I had you on, because I was intrigued by this argument that if you have a bail bond system, it makes it more likely that the bad guys or people accused of doing bad things, in this case, will actually show up in court and do what they're supposed to do and not go running around as fugitives. And yet we have governments that are trying to horn in on the action, and they're not very good at it. Is that a fair summation of it?
That's exactly right. We're seeing more impetus toward these taxpayer-funded free bail bond stores since the Obama administration began, because now, for the first time ever, the Federal Bureau of Justice Assistance Program is funding with federal dollars a couple of organizations who promote the expansion of these pretrial service agencies, they're called. There are several hundred of them around the country, and you got it just right. There are some philosophical and practical and ethical differences between secured release pending trial and their program of unsecured release pending trial.
What's the argument the government agencies use for why they want to set these things up?
It's basically a philosophical argument. Their underpinning is that the only reason this person is incarcerated in the first place is because society has failed him. If we had been all to him that we should have been, he never would have been arrested.
Boy, isn't that a compassionate kind of way of approaching it, I guess? And I'm not very happy with it. I'm being a bit sarcastic, but I mean, to say we failed him, he's not the guy who went out and committed rape, robbery, murder, or mayhem?
Well, when somebody breaks the law or based upon probable cause is legitimately believed to have broken the law, whereas there's a witness and an arresting officer and a victim, and all of these people say that this person broke the law, it's either that way or it isn't that way. He either broke the law or we, in effect, broke the law by setting him up to fail.
Huh. Sounds like a pretty nanny state kind of attitude.
Well, we refer to President Obama's criminal justice system administration as a defendant-friendly administration, and it really simply boils down to that. That's the philosophical difference. The practical difference, Mr. Larson, you mentioned at the outset, and that is, if the purpose of release pending trial is to have the person back in court for disposition of the charges against them,
yep,
then the practical difference is their approach does not work, and the statistics demonstrate that very, very clearly. And on the other hand, the private enterprise commercial bail bonding system works fabulously well in that regard.
Because obviously, if you tell somebody you're going to have to put up your mom's house or a whole bunch of cash or something like that, and if you split, you're not only going to forfeit what you put up, but we're going to come out and chase you down and bring you back because we don't want to eat the full bail amount. We don't want to eat the cost that the state's going to charge when they say, here, where's the $100,000 in bail? That's a system that compels people to be where they're supposed to be.
Well, that's right. It's in today's economy, and for quite a few years now, it's unlikely that the insurance company is going to be fully indemnified or security is going to protect their interest financially. So in almost every case, I would say in more than 99% of the cases, the insurance company's money is on the line. Their agent will enter into a contract on their behalf with the people in the state that says, if you let this person out, we will give you our bond guaranteeing that we will have him in court. And if we don't, we guarantee that we will pay the amount of bail that the court set to the state. Now, the typical premium on a bail bond is 10% of the amount of the bond. So if the insurance agent and the insurance company get 10%, and they do not get the person back, and they've had to pay all of their overhead, the cost of their operation, the cost of attempting to find the person, and they end up with maybe 2% of that 10% left, and yet they have to go pay the full amount of the bail. They have to write hundreds of bonds just to get even on that one loss. So the numbers dictate that if we don't get upwards towards 99%, over 98% for sure, of the people we bond out back to court, either get them there on their court date or find them and surrender them back into custody. If we don't do one of those two things, we not only would not have lasted 107 years, we wouldn't have lasted 107 weeks.
So what are the stats on the public system that's being set up by government, and you say most aggressively in just the last 2 years?
Yeah, a recent study done in the largest pretrial service agency in the country, which is Houston, Texas, demonstrated very, very clearly that the persons who were out through that pretrial service agency without a secured bond, one of our bonds, was exactly twice as apt to fail to appear. Now, a study was done in Sacramento County, in Los Angeles County, in San Francisco County, and in San Diego County, conducted by the American Legislative Exchange Council, and it demonstrated that on the average in those four counties, the people who were out through these local pretrial service agencies were about 45% no-shows. In other words, almost 50% of them failed to appear in court for disposition of the charges against them. Now that's bad news, but that's not the worst news. The worst news is that bail fugitives in the community have been clearly demonstrated to be highly recidivistic. So consequently, the more you grow that number of people who get out on an unsecured pretrial release, the more you're growing the number of crime victims in the neighborhood. And what that translates into, very simply, is that local taxpayers are funding a free bail operation in their county that is increasing the number of crime victims in their neighborhood, and they don't even know it.
That's because, just to translate it, recidivism means doing the crime again. So if what you're talking about is we let somebody go instead of making them show up in court and do what they're supposed to do, and as a result, they get the message that society doesn't take this seriously, and so they say, fine, I'll go out and steal another car, or I'll knock over another old lady and take her purse.
Precisely. I mean, here's the way it works. If somebody gets out of pretrial custody on an unsecured bond, in other words, all they're putting up is their promise that they'll come back, and this pretrial service agency encourages the court to let them out that way, saying to the court, Judge, if he doesn't, he'll keep his promise because we're going to monitor him and get him back to court. So he doesn't need to have anybody put up anything of value to guarantee that he'll come back. We'll get him back. Now, when somebody goes out that way, and they know this because, they didn't just ride into town on a turnip truck. They know that if they get out that way, if they can get one of those kinds of releases, they know three things for sure. They don't have to come to court, nobody's going to come after them, and nobody's going to pay anything. So what it amounts to is rewarding bad behavior. If you reward bad behavior, you're just going to get worse behavior. And that's why the recidivism rate is high. Consequently, that's the practical difference between their system and our system.
And I don't know.
They reward bad performance. They reward bad performance on the one hand, and we prevent bad performance on the other.
And I don't imagine. Well, I do imagine that the costs of running those operations, even beyond the human cost of having more recidivism and all that, is something that the public doesn't need to bear. It could be borne by private industry like your company.
We do it not only at no cost to the taxpayer, but we do it better than government does it. And in those rare instances where we don't get it done, we pay a lot of money to the county.
Which means they are it's revenue neutral, almost revenue positive to them because
yes, it's absolutely revenue positive. There's absolutely no question about it. It's a strange thing today. I mean, it's really a strange thing that we don't quite get. People in my industry in this part of the insurance world, we just don't quite get it. We read every day in the paper and we hear every day on the news about counties having to lay off police. Camden, New Jersey, just had to let half of their police force go. Counties all over the country are cutting back on food lunch programs. They're cutting back on working mother daycare programs. They're cutting back on mental health programs for the indigent and the homeless. They're cutting back on all these programs, but they're not cutting back on the funding on these criminal welfare programs. In fact, the federal government is encouraging them to expand them at taxpayer expense.
So all they'd have to do is invite you to come in, disband their operation, make sure more people show up at court, the criminals get a more serious lesson, and it doesn't cost the county any money.
That's right, and the cost of the criminal justice system decreases because you don't have what you mentioned a while ago, which is the uncalculable cost of new crimes being committed, and we do know this. We do know that the cost of a single failure to appear to the justice system by reason of the prosecutor having been ready, the court calling the case, the witness being there ready to testify, the defendant fails to appear, the cost has been calculated to the local justice system at in excess of $2,000. So if you've got tens of thousands of these people not showing up, that cost has been calculated and is quite considerable. But the greatest cost of all is all of that uncollected money. When these people don't show up after their bail has been set, and nobody goes and collects that money when their bail is forfeited, that's money that's lost to the community. One clear example is Philadelphia.
You know what, Mr. Watson? Unfortunately, I'm up against the clock, but we'd love to have you back in the future, and I appreciate you taking the time. You want to give your company a plug?
Well, it's AI. We write about 1 out of every 5 bails in the country, and we write it through a network, Lars, called expertbail.com. Highly professional bail agent.
We'll be glad to recommend people go that direction. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. You've got the Lars Larson Show.
Lars Larson.